Whitening Wednesday. Today is episode 13, and today we have Elisha with us, who is the owner and founder of BeautyXLish. And I'm so excited to chat with Elisha. She's doing so many different things in the industry, and we might as well just dive right in. So, Elisha, tell us about how you started your teeth whitening journey.
Hi, Rachel. First and foremost, I just want to say thank you so much for having me on this call. I know that we had to push it back a little bit, but we're here. We got here in the end.
Right?
Um, so long time coming, to be honest. So I was kind of always the person that was never settled, I guess you could say. Like I was dipping my toes everywhere. I didn't know what I wanted to do with my life. And you know what? A lot of people can relate to that,
Mm,
right?
for
And I
sure.
just felt like I was on this constant hamster wheel. Like I was bartending, I was working in a nightclub, then I went to school and became a social worker. Then my mental health took a toll. So then I decided, hey, let's run away from Canada for a while. And then I moved to Dubai and worked for Emirates. So
So
alongside
cool.
that, I wanted to have a side hustle because, as we know, things are expensive, life is expensive. So I wanted a side hustle on the side, and that's where I took on lashing to start off with. So
Mm,
I'm formally known as Lash by Leash, and then decided that I hated it. So from there, I dove into teeth whitening. So someone that I knew started a company years ago and originally reached out to me when I was living in Dubai and wanted me to start it over there. However, I'm the type of person that like hooms and haws about everything before I actually dive into it. So I left it for a while, then dove in, and it was a lot easier than I had expected, right? And
amazing.
the number one thing when it comes to whitening is you're bringing back confidence in people's smiles,
Mm,
and it just kind of really took off from there. But it was still a side hustle, right? Then obviously fast forwarding a few years, I gained enough clientele, I gained enough knowledge where I decided to start training. And now I have the opportunity to train so many like-minded individuals. And I'm going to actually be moving into business coaching soon as well, which is super
amazing.
exciting. But yeah, that's just me in a nutshell. Lots happened, but I just never really felt fully settled and I wanted to be my own boss. And that's exactly what this company has given me.
That's so great. And I love that you have such a wide range of experience because I bet even though it didn't physically, like you probably never saw teeth whitening as the end goal, but all those
No.
different customer care industries that you were in, learning how to deal with clients, learning about, if there's any issues or like there was probably so much that you learned. I can imagine, especially with the airline, like that probably built so much foundation for you becoming your own founder and CEO.
No, exactly that. And I've always worked in very service-based industries, like whether it be hospitality or even working in the airline industry, right? And the one thing that I'm always teaching in all my trainings is customer service.
Mm,
Um, I know I'm very much back and forth between Canada and the UK. And I noticed that the customer service in the UK isn't as top tier as it is in Canada. Um,
really?
so that's something that I really try to push on all of my students. Now, when it comes to customer service, like I always explain to clients that teeth whitening is a very word of mouth industry,
Hmm.
right? And you can do as many teeth as you want and you can post as many before and afters as you want. But in the long run, if you don't treat your customer well and you don't build that rapport with them, you're not going to domino effect into their following or
For
their
sure.
friends and family, things like that, right? So that's why I always say, I'm like, if you treat your client like we know now that so many people offer teeth whitening, right?
Hmm. For
And
sure.
I always say, like, even if you don't ask that client for a before and after, follow up with them after their service, anything like that, they're going to go find someone else, man. And there's loads of teeth whitening techs out there now. They can go find someone else. So that's why I say building a rapport is number one. And realistically, if you look at any job, customer service is some way incorporated in it, right?
Yeah, no, customer service is huge. And that's so great that you brought that up. That at the end of the day, obviously they're there for results, but as we know, there's many different reasons why results may or may not happen. But even if they don't get the result that they were looking for, if the client experience was top notch from start to finish, they are still going to recommend you. They're probably going to come back again. And if you have your business set up, say with retail items, etc., there's going to be other things that they can purchase from you that,
Exactly.
right? So that is huge. Now, what have you found, like, since customer service is so at the forefront, how have you found that in building like your physical space? Did you find that you have little perks of like little extras that you like for your clients? Like I've seen some techs have like little water stations or like little extras. At our studio, we more or less just kind of went a little extra with like the before and after take home bags. But is there anything,
Yeah.
is that kind of what you do too? Do you kind of elevate that?
Ex- exactly that. So depends on where I am. So in Canada, if I'm clinic based, then we do the water bottles on the bed with an aftercare bag. Inside the UK, I've set up obviously the aftercare bags along with loyalty cards as well. I
Nice.
like to have that loyalty program for the clients so that they do feel like they're getting something back out of it afterwards. And then in regards to actually students and things like that, like I throw in, they'll tell you anyways, but I'll throw in freebies for them all the time, right? Like if they're
Awesome.
purchasing a bulk package or spending over a certain amount, then I always throw in something extra for them. It's just showing that loyalty, right? And giving back to the community, and they're supporting my business, so why not support theirs as well? And then just on the other side of things, if I do train a lot of people who have other businesses, whether they have
That's
a
true.
fitness company or things like
Right.
that, right? And I try to always incorporate purchasing something from their company as well, just because they did invest in me. And I just think it's nice to give back and invest in something that they're passionate about outside of the whitening industry as well.
That's so good. So good. And that makes a lot of sense, especially since teeth whitening is such a complimentary service. It's so easy to add it on to existing businesses. Like,
It's amazing. It's I always say to everybody, it's such a lucrative industry to be in, and people don't realize it, but you can offer the service to both men and women. So right
yes,
there, you're not just secluded to just doing women's teeth. And men love to have white teeth just as much as women do, right? And it's just an easy service for people to make good money. However, then it comes to obviously the industry as a whole, right?
yes, right. And I mean, we've chatted about it before. There's definitely, obviously, lots of great things in the industry, but there are some things in the industry that definitely do need some work. So we know you have trainings, which is so exciting. What are some things that you would recommend if someone's listening and they're really interested in jumping in? What's the one thing that you would say you should really look for this before choosing a training?
Well, I can actually give you an example from today. So, someone had purchased my gels recently, and she had sent me a photo and said, the client didn't have much difference, and she didn't train with me, right? You already know where I'm going with this. So I had sent her a message back, asked a couple, obviously, questions to try and
Mhm.
figure out a little bit about her. Did you keep the gels in the fridge? Was your client a smoker? Did they drink a lot of coffee? Things like that, right? And she said, yeah, gels are in the fridge, this, that, and the other. And then I just was curious and I was like, so who did you train with? Right. And then I went into the details about the natural stop point. And I was like, did you learn that everybody has a different stop point? No set of teeth are the same. Like the teeth whitening potential is different. And at the end of the day, people like to have this facade that teeth whitening is guaranteed. But at the end of the day, no results are guaranteed because we don't know what someone's teeth whitening potential is,
For
right?
sure,
And
right?
unfortunately, she said, I didn't learn about that. And I can't apologize for something that I didn't train in, right? But it just makes you think, you know what I mean? Like, how can you not teach about something like that? Are you just teaching that all results are guaranteed?
For sure, right? So that's, I feel like it's one of these things where if you're thinking about getting into the industry, you really have to use your common sense too, right? Like, would it make sense that everyone is going to be Hollywood bright after a session? No.
No. And that's why I tell all my students, I'm like, do not just post your whitest and brightest results because it's giving people this false image that all
Mhm.
results are going to be like this when in reality, we don't know what someone's natural stop point is until the end of their session.
Right? For sure.
Right.
For
So
sure.
then then obviously it brings us to the barrier situation. Like, you know me and barrier.
Yes, so give us the lowdown. What's your take on barrier? You're like barrier it all.
Oh my God, I love barrier. Like, I am the barrier queen and the barrier Nazi. So I don't think a lot of people understand the importance of barrier, because I've had people come in and retrain with me because they haven't been trained on barrier, and they're using peroxide based gels, which is mind blowing to me that they could have been trained without barrier. Right. And, you know, the gums at the end of the day, they're what seal around our teeth. So you're going to
Mhm.
want to keep those safe throughout the entire procedure. It's just, for us, it's probably common sense, but for others, they just think, okay, well, maybe if I just skip this step, then all will be fine. And we know that teeth whitening is a very safe procedure for the most part,
Mhm.
but if you're not using barrier, obviously certain issues can occur,
For sure. For sure, right?
right? And I think it's just very risky. Like, I see people all the time, and they're not protecting the gums properly, or there's massive gaps of their barrier. People aren't checking all angles to ensure that everything is covered. And at the end of the day, like, take the protecting of the gums out of it, you're causing your client severe sensitivity,
For sure. Yep. They're
right?
not going to
And
be too
as
happy.
no, they're not. And as someone who has extremely sensitive teeth, I am so against, like, causing client sensitivity. It's the number one thing that I talk about all the time. That it's my goal, because for me, breathing in air hurts. Okay, like, it is just it's just something for me that I want to prevent, right? So I want people to master their barrier. And then it brings me to people who are training, and then they're not even doing their barrier properly themselves, which I'm sure you see as well, right? So the industry is very taboo, as we know.
Mhm.
And obviously, as we know, in Canada, there's no regulations in regards to who can do things, who can't do things, but there's minimal to no regulations everywhere also, right, in
For
regards to the
sure.
training industry.
Mhm.
But people think that, okay, let's make a quick buck with training, but they don't see that they're not actually training properly.
Exactly, exactly. And I think that leaves us with two great points here so the first thing I would love to mention is you like nailed it on the head. You're like, a lot of people jump into training because they think that it's just going to be more lucrative. So that's one thing I would look for if you are looking for training, that it's not somebody who just started last week and they're already offering training, right?
Oh
Make
my God,
sure,
exactly.
make
Like,
sure that
you've only been like recently qualified for 6 months, and all of a sudden you think you can offer a training course? Like, it's just mind blowing.
yes, right? So I would definitely note that. And on the flip end of things, if you are a teeth whitening tech, you're listening and you've been thinking about training, remember that that dollar amount that you're selling your course or your products for, that's not straight profit, guys. You are getting a very slim amount of that, right? By the time you add in your products and your time for building out your course, if that's virtual or in person. I mean, I think they think the training industry is so lucrative, but there's so much you have to think about. You have to think about saving half that revenue for your next purchase on more products. And it's like, it's such a domino that I think you just see a dollar number and you think, oh, I can sell that and be golden. Well, you don't just take that money, right?
No, it's true, right? There's so much more that goes into it. Like, obviously, like, little things that you don't even think about, like bags to give your clients, packaging, like, all of that stuff adds up. And then at the end of the day, you're like, okay, so I mean, don't get me wrong, it's still a lucrative industry to be in, but
It's not that
loads,
straight dollar.
loads, loads of expenses that I think a lot of people don't realize when they come out of it. And to be fair, like, people start training and not everybody is successful, right? And I think that's
Exactly.
because they don't realize how expensive it actually is to
Mhm.
build a successful training company.
Yeah, it is definitely a marathon, not a sprint for sure.
Oh my God, I
And
love that.
it takes time. And I feel like everything we've just kind of briefly talked about, from the barrier to something like, not potentially being successful with training or with even teeth whitening, since there are so many out there now, is it all comes back to customer service. The thing that I find the most, especially when it comes to people that are neglecting barrier or looking for gels that you could get away with without barrier, is they're trying to reduce their client time to get either more through the door, or say do like a huge pop up and it's just a pop in, pop out. And at the end of the day, I mean, is that really going to be successful in the long run, right?
No, it's not.
It's not. If you're just popping on some crappy gel with no barrier that is going to maybe dehydrate the tooth really quick and chairside, that your client's like, oh, that looks great, and then you never see them again. First off, they're never returning, so they're not going to be a repeat customer. And second off, in 24 to 48 hours, that brightness is going to be gone, and then you're back at square one, right? So
Exactly. What's your thoughts on, I'm sure you see it all the time as well, but people posting their barrier?
it is, do you mean like photos of the barrier on the teeth?
Like, when people post their before and afters and you see the barrier and then the after photo, what's your thoughts on that one?
So yes, if the whoever's listening, if you've done it, no shame, but anything up to blue looks lighter. So if you are leaving your barrier on, you're giving a false result, right? Like anything.
Yeah.
So I find, especially if you take a photo before and then you take the after photo with the barrier on the teeth, I'm sure you notice it. It looks so bright. I've even been guilty of this when I'm removing gel chairside with a client, and I'm like, holy smokes, you got really good results. And then you take off the barrier and you're like, never mind.
Yeah, they're actually average. But on the other side of things, that's a very good point, Rach. But on the other side of things, I always say don't post your barrier. One, because of the results. But two, if you're missing areas, it looks really bad.
That's true.
Like, it looks really bad. Like, unless your barrier is like perfect to the 10,
Yeah, which is
if you
hard.
have it's very hard. And if you have other like gaps that are showing, one, it shows people that you haven't protected them properly. And two, it shows other techs that maybe you weren't trained properly as well.
Exactly, for sure. No, that's a great point.
Right?
That's a great point for sure. And I would say, especially with social media being such a draw in this day and age, I get that it's hard to build content, but again, it kind of comes back to customer common sense. Make sure that you're putting out things that are reflecting your work, but then also your client doesn't need to see every single step as well, right? Or if you are going to show it, make sure, as you mentioned, you are doing it properly. And if you are posting things and you're not realizing that it's not done properly, it can just be obviously in the future not the greatest for your clients to see. Or on the flip side, say if down the line you do decide to jump into trainings, mentorship, etc., and someone's scrolling through, that's pictures of your work.
Exactly that. And it doesn't look good with building a clientele later down the line, I promise you that. But people still do it, right? Like, at the end of the day, you can only advise people what not to do, and they're their own business. They take from it what they'd like to take from it, from the course. And people still do things that we advise them not to do, obviously, but
For sure.
what do you do, right?
Yeah. And I feel like you've kind of nailed everything, from the customer service to, if you are looking for trainings, looking for that experience. And also, I'm assuming, because I mean, your content's so great, you kind of cover business as a whole as well, right?
Thank you.
So many great business tips. Is there anything that you wish you knew before jumping into the teeth whitening industry?
How much work of owning your own business would be, and that even just gaining a clientele, it's hard. It's very hard. And like, lessons that I would have learned is like being consistent, right? And back in the day, like I said, it was just a side hustle, but I never understood how all these businesses were also side hustles, but they were growing so quickly, but I was still stagnant, right? And over time, when I started to take the business more seriously and do my research on social media and things like that, I came to realize that you can't build a business unless you're consistent,
So true.
right? Like I get so many messages all the time about how to gain a clientele, and you know what? People want this fix, like this fast fix,
Hmm.
right? People assume, which I'm sure you know as well, people assume they're going to take a course and then they're just going to have this magic sauce and have 100,000 clients at their door.
Right? It doesn't happen
That's
like that, does it?
that's not the way it works. Like at the beginning, you need to be posting on Instagram 5 to 6 times a week if you're going to be growing through socials. You need to advertise in Facebook and Instagram groups, like
Hmm.
any sort of group to get your name out there. You're doing models for free, like anything to basically build that portfolio, right? Networking is the number one thing that I can say that I picked up on in the last, I'd say, 3 years. That has helped me explode, really, like really and truthfully. And if I can help anybody out there, it's just to be consistent.
Yeah, amazing. So I feel like those are all great pieces of advice for how to build clientele.
Yeah. And show your personality. That's another one. Showing your personality, like some people have this thing where they don't want to show their face on social media. And I get it. It's scary, right? I used to be petrified of the camera. Heck, even right before we got on this call, I was like, I'm pretty nervous to go on this call with you. But you push yourself out of your comfort zone, right? But one thing people forget about is your business is a brand. And a
True.
brand is so much more than just the colors and the fonts,
Hmm.
right? A brand is you as a whole, what you represent, and showing what your personality is. 9 times out of 10, someone is going to purchase your course because of you, not because of the course,
True. True, right?
right? So branding is like insanely important.
Yeah, that's so true. And it's going to become more and more prevalent, especially as the industry gets bigger and bigger, to kind of weed out who they're going to go with. Obviously, your brand is going to be something that's going to stand out to that specific
Exactly.
person.
Like me, for example, like my passion and my why is to inspire and motivate women and like-minded individuals. And
Mhm.
anything that I post really goes that extra mile to show clients and students that I'll be here for them in the long run, not just for the short run, right?
Right.
Like I'm not going to ever be a trainer that's like, hey, you're trained, all right, bye, see you later. Like that's, but unfortunately it happens, right? And yeah, like it's just your brand message and your personality that comes with your business is just that's what's going to help you grow big
So
time.
true. So true. Well, Alicia, this has been so awesome. So you had mentioned you have some fun stuff coming down the line on top of everything else you already have. So where can we learn more about like your business coaching and all your teeth whitening options? Where can we follow along?
Yeah, so it's going to be posted on my website, of course. Over the next couple weeks, I'm going to be releasing lots on my stories in regards to business coaching. I'm just finalizing some things with my tech guy and my coach and
Exciting.
getting everything all prepped. But yeah, no, I've had a lot of inquiries about the coaching side of things and things like that. So I just decided to dive in, get out of not out of the teeth whitening industry. I love doing it, but just obviously have something else going as well.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's been so good. It's been so good talking to you,
Amazing.
Rach, and like
Yes.
I'm so happy.
So what is, for those listening, of course I'm going to post it, but what is your website and your socials?
So my website is www.beautyxleash.com and my social is at beautyxlish underscore. And then that's where you can find me with all my motivating content.
Amazing. So good. Well, thanks so much, Alicia. And those listening, thank you for listening to another episode of Whitening Wednesday, and we'll be back again next week. Thank yous. Let's dive in. First one is all about lights. We've been chatting about lights a lot lately, and I feel like this always comes up around this time of the year because wedding season's coming around close, which opens up a lot of entrepreneurs' minds, and they're like, oh my goodness, I should have a teeth whitening business, especially in the crazy like wedding season. So I do find lights always get traction around this time of the year because usually it's a high purchasing time for whitening equipment in general. I feel like I am very straightforward with this topic, and this is why. I like to describe lights and whitening gel. You've probably heard me say this before, but very similar to brushing your teeth with toothpaste. If you're to brush your teeth, the toothpaste is there as an extra, but it's not the main component that's removing the debris, the plaque, etc. The brushing motion is the most important. The toothpaste is just the cherry on top. So, I find this motto very helpful when it comes to discussing floor lights and whitening gels. There's lots of studies, especially dental studies, that claim that whitening lights actually are a crock of shit and they're not actually doing anything helpful for the process. Let's break this down. So, first thing I would say is if your light company is saying that they provide the best results and you're seeing really bright before and after photos, number one, I would say it's probably producing heat, which is going to dehydrate the tooth. Number two, if that is happening, not ideal. If you're not aware, even in the dental world, we're taught not to over-cure something because it can irritate and cause different things to the pulp. I could get very scientific with you there in dental terminology, but I'm not going to. So that just keep in the back of your mind that too much heat on the teeth is not good. So that would be one thing I would note to a company that's trying to tell me that they produce better results because of their light. And another thing I would note is if a company is really pushing their light with their product, then they are probably using a whitening gel that is photo initiated ion, like not ions, it's a photo initiator in the whitening gel, which then means that that LED light is going to activate and break down the gels and cause them to oxidize. So that would be like one of those things where you can easily just buy gels that don't need that. It's catch-22 there. They're just kind of catching you on both ends of the marketing spectrum. So first thing would be heat, watch for heat. Second thing would be watch for what their gel says. If it says that it really needs a light to break down, then that's going to really limit you to the specific gels that you're using for that light, but you could use that light with other gels. On the flip side, another thing to watch for is mouthpieces. There are some lights on the market that are very expensive and have their own specific light or mouthpiece, and this is very interesting, and you should do your research on this before you get started. First off, figure out, okay, if it can only be used with this type of retractor, how much is it? If I have to repurchase it for every client, how much is that going to cut into my margins? Number two to look for in this situation is, okay, if it's saying it can be reprocessed, what's my sterilization protocols? Just throwing Cavicide on it and washing it with dish soap is not acceptable. You need to be following your regulations. That being said, some areas do allow cold soaking. Here in Ontario, our sterilization protocols are so intense. Like, I don't even think of cold soaking as a thing anymore because we're just so used of doing things very differently here. So you would really have to look into your specific area to make sure that you are not disinfecting, that you are sterilizing appropriately. And the last thing to think about that's related to that, if you are reprocessing, your insurance rates are most likely going to be a lot higher. So your premiums are going to be higher because guess what? If you aren't using a one-use disposable, you are going to be much more high risk to be transmitting diseases, viruses, bacteria, etc. from client to client. So, want to keep your insurance rates down? keep with one-use disposables. That's a big one. So what's my answer here with lights? I would make sure it's nice and tall, so you have some nice arm reach. That would be number one. Number two, I would check the wavelength. Again, you want to make sure that it's not producing heat necessarily, but the wavelengths are going to be something that you want to look into, especially if you are working with a gel that says that it needs that activation. And the third thing would be red light therapy. You've heard me chat about it before. It's your backup plan that you didn't know you needed. If you are working especially with the higher gels, or even if you are doing a self-administered option, you can still obviously accidentally get the gel on the soft tissue. Maybe that's the gums, maybe that's the lips. And if this happens, of course, it is going to go away eventually, depending on how badly it's been cinched. It might be 5 minutes, might be 10 minutes, might be 15 minutes. But what's going to happen during that time is your client is going to have irritation. So if you have a red light option on your floor light, this is huge. Red light therapy is a thing. It's going to help soothe that area and regenerate that area a lot quicker than it would on its own. So it's a backup plan. It's helpful, and your clients will thank you for it, because regardless of your experience, you are sometimes accidentally going to get that gel where it shouldn't be. So it's going to happen. That's my scoop on floor lights. And you know that at our, with you whitening, we carry a few different, we personally use a few different models, but all the models that we use are tall in red and blue light. That's what we use. Question is, how do I, what are some tips and tricks on making sure that I don't get the gel where it shouldn't go? Let's dive into it. So first thing is, of course, your gingival barrier is going to go on your gums. So that's going to protect your gums, is your gingival barrier. Then your lip covered, say if these were our lips, you should have a retractor that covers the lips. Lots of different styles out there. So that covers that soft tissue. But what about the tongue? And what about, the gel just getting somewhere, or not even gel? What if it's etch, etc.? If you're doing a gem, how do I make sure, what's a little extra backup plan if I'm feeling a little less confident in applying gel? Here's a couple tips. So what do we know about our lovely intraoral cavity is we have the inside of the teeth here. So this is what we call the lingual surfaces. What I would do is, if you're not feeling confident with whatever the product is while you're placing the gel, have a 2x2 with you as you're placing it. So just pop a 2x2 underneath, and then while you are placing on whatever the product is, that's going to be a little extra blanket, you could call it. Or if you're finding that a gauze is too flimsy, you could do something like a double-sided disposable mirror. If you don't have these are super handy to have. They are posted on PWP if you want some. But what you can do is you can be placing on your gel on the buccal, the facial, the front surface there, and then this would just sit along your lingual edges as you go, as just an extra protector, just in case some does fall off, or if they have loose contacts or a diastema, something like that. Then if any gel or etch were to fall, it's not going on their tongue, it's not going floating around intraoral, it's going to fall on that surface that's on the lingual edge. Just a tip. That's what we do at our studio, and we find it's just an extra peace of mind, especially if you have a client who has a really large tongue. That's a good idea, especially something like a double-sided mirror to just help keep that out of the way so it doesn't get on specific, the gel gets somewhere or edge that it shouldn't. Thanks so much, guys. This was another episode of Whitening Wednesday, and keep sending us in your FAQs. So much for completing another Whitening Wednesday episode. Don't forget to check out our sponsor, Professional Whitening Products, for all of your teeth whitening technician needs.